So did anybody get a response from anybody yet?
Yeah.
Not yet, okay, you will. You will. Welcome, it's
Thank
nice
you.
to have you. Okay, so the thing we're going to be discussing right now is presenting the offer. And when you move into the negotiation, it's page 17, when you move into negotiation by presenting your current offer to the co-op agent and listening to the response. So that's assuming there is a co-op agent or another.
What does that mean?
It's the other agent, basically. So if you're the buyer's agent, you have the co-op agent would be the seller's agent, and vice versa. So the first thing you do is you call the other agent to let them know that the offer or counter offer is coming. Then invite them into the buying loop in the edge. We're gonna ignore that right now because we're not using that. Pay attention to nonverbal clues. While it's not always possible or practical to make your presentation in person, a face-to-face meeting is best, always.
Even to the, as a buyer agent, to make a personal,
I wouldn't do it with another agent, but I would definitely do it with the buyer or seller if I could, face-to-face.
when would you ever interface with the seller?
Well, no, if you have the listing. Whenever
Oh, I
you
see, I
present
see, I
the
see.
offer to your client,
Oh, I
you
see,
should
I see.
always try to do it face-to-face
I
if
gotcha.
you can.
Gotcha.
It doesn't always work out that way, but if you can sit down, the nonverbal clues are huge.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
This is assuming.
sometimes too huge. I've had people just get up and walk off.
So that's interesting that you say that, because this is all assuming you don't have the complete, buy-in from your client. Like, if you knew your client was with you 100%, then you would know that you have the freedom to say whatever it is you have to say, and then them kind of accept it or work with you in a way that doesn't suggest that they're flighty. You know what I mean? Like, why, we're only concerned about doing this if we really are still trying to gather information from our client, is what you're kind of suggesting, I
On the
think.
face-to-face?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just think it's good business, if you could sit down, especially with buyers, when you're going back and forth with counteroffers. So you're assuming that it's a great offer, is that what you're saying?
I'm assuming
Or
my,
that you have
my
an
client's
understanding?
already, like in my case, my client's super on board, they're into it, so I don't really feel like I need to work to suss out any other information from them, because I already know where they're at,
Got it.
you know? So my question is, it sounds like this is just another opportunity to learn more about where your client is mentally throughout this process.
It is.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think as you're going through the process of writing and presenting, definitely it's a good way to find out, you know, exactly where they are. And that helps you decide where to go and how to get there.
Sure.
But it's also good business, you know,
Yeah.
just to meet face-to-face. If anytime you can meet face-to-face versus over the telephone or doing everything on digitally, I think there's a benefit to that in
Mhm.
building relationships. And this is still a relationship business, no matter how you look at it.
Mhm.
It may not start out like that because everything usually starts on the internet, but then it turns into a relationship. You develop the relationship, and that's why people work with you. So-
Sorry, where we can see this PowerPoint on the
Okay.
website?
Move out of the way here. Thank you, Netta, for doing that, I appreciate it. Then it goes on to keep quiet once you present the offer, and sometimes that's really hard for us. So if I sit down with you and I say, Isaac, we have an offer on your house, and it's $1,200,000, and we're closing in 30 days, it's all cash. How does that sound to you? And then don't say anything else. Because he who speaks first generally loses.
Are you talking as if you were speaking to the,
To the listing, to the seller,
To the city.
or to the buyer. Either way, whenever you talk to them about the offer, because you may be presenting a counter offer from the seller to the buyer.
well, assuming you're talking to your own client?
Yes, you're assuming, yeah, this is talking to your own client. So when you're talking to your own client, you present the information and then stop talking. Because so many times, then we start to tell them why it's great and why they should accept it, and sometimes we just need to be quiet. listen carefully to what is important to the other party. Write down what they say to demonstrate that you are taking them very seriously, and then move on. I think that's really important. I don't always write it down, but I certainly am engaged in the conversation 100% to make sure, because I have to understand. I have to know exactly, and if I don't, I'm not doing a great job for them.
Right.
Stay calm and relaxed. Again, these are emotional times when you're in the process of negotiation, so the only thing we can really do is to stay calm. When we lose our composure, party's over, because we're not gonna be able to have their faith and trust in us to be the expert to get them to where they need to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What if you say to seller, I have a good news for you. It's going to give you $1,200,000 cash. What do you think?
I think that's a great way to present it, if you know that it's gonna be good news,
So it's
right?
good news.
It is good news.
Somebody's offering, yeah.
I wish somebody would give me $1 million too right now, for anything, right?
I'll take it.
I'll take it. But no, that's really good. Yeah, I mean, it's always presented in a upward light, of course.
Just gonna say $1,200,000 is not attractive, and you say I have a good news today for you.
Yeah, then it changes everything, yeah. But what if it's a really bad offer? Then how do you present it? What do you say? If it's really not good news, if it's really bad news, how do you present it?
If it is good or bad.
Bad.
So that I think is good idea. At least $1,200,000 is going to give you cash. It's up to you. You don't want it for you.
Yeah,
No pushing here. If you push,
no.
you'll lose it.
When I got that low offer on Friday,
I said,
Um,
please don't
the
give me
first
the
one.
answer right now. Think about it overnight. I call you back or I see you, see what we can do to do it better for you. To do it better, then you wouldn't lose him. Tomorrow you will see what better you can do for
you
him.
know, and that's really smart to do that, because people change their mind overnight. The first reaction is, how? You know, and the second reaction is, well, maybe it's not that bad. And then after they sleep on it, sometimes they're more open and willing. This offer that I got on Friday was really low, and I knew that she was gonna be really upset when I told her what it was. So I had called her and said, I have a really awful offer that came in, so, and she goes, oh, really? I said, it's so bad, I'm not even gonna tell you what it is.
Really just sandbag it?
I did.
Yeah.
She goes, okay, thank you. And so she said, is it really that bad? I said, it's really that bad. And she goes, okay, all right, then I don't even wanna know what it is. So then she talked for a couple more minutes. She goes, so tell me what it is. But the interesting thing was, we had had another offer on this particular property that was also low about a month ago. She wouldn't open the offer. So
Oh.
when I finally talked them into counter offering it, I sent it to her. That's the reason I addressed it this way. I sent it to her and I said, you know, go through the offer, and I know that you're not gonna accept it, but let's think about countering it. And you said, we're not gonna counter it, we're done with it, yada, yada, yada. So, the 3 days go by, and it's the third day, and I call and said, I really think you should counter. We're probably not gonna get it together, I get that, but let's at least,
Oh, you're asking,
Give it
now
her-
you're asking the
the
buyer?
seller to counter.
You're representing the buyer or seller?
Seller.
Oh, you're, okay, I see.
I have one question. If the seller say, okay, I'm happy, I would accept it, what would you do with buyer? How you call him and tell him what happened?
I've got great news.
No, I wouldn't say.
What do you mean?
If you say great news, you know what he might think? He say, oh, maybe if I give offer $1,000, he would accept it.
Yeah,
I say, no, he didn't accept it yet. Let me, I talk to him, I'm working on it, give me overnight. Be ready for this, I am trying to do it for you.
oh, so it wasn't
That's the
an
best
accepted,
way.
it was not good news, it was not an accepted offer?
Good news for seller, not
Good
for
news.
the buyer.
Got it, okay.
If you are buyer, you tell me, okay, $1,200,000, give the offer. So I
Yeah.
go to seller say yes, very good, it's good news. When you come back to buyers, some buyers, especially Iranian people, when you say yes, they accept it, they say, okay, maybe it's not worth it, this house, that
Uh-huh.
expects it, accept it so early, you know? So it's better you say, no,
Ah.
he's not going to give it to you. Let me work on it tonight. I
So
try
now you
my
create a
best
sense
and
of
I
value for him.
go to him and take a present, everything to make it for you. Then they would appreciate you and they appreciate the deal.
I think it's a good tactic. You know
That's
your
what it is.
people, right? So you're going back with, I think, if it works,
Because everybody would work.
yes. So, I love that, and you're focusing on your customers' needs, which I guess their need to negotiate.
Were you saying something about your deal though? Did you finish that thought?
No, I didn't. So she wouldn't open the offer, so whenever I did finally talk her into doing a counter offer, I said, so what about the rest of the terms? She goes, well, I didn't read it. I said, you didn't look at any of the other terms? And she said, no. I said, well, because she didn't want to look at it, she wasn't gonna look at it, period. So, finally, we went over the term, I met with them, we went over the terms, then we ended up rejecting the offer anyway, but the one, that's why I said, I don't think you wanna open this offer. I just think we should ignore it.
Oh, what happened with the counter? You guys countered or no?
We didn't, we ended up rejecting it. So, but I always try to keep them until they buy or die.
What happened,
That's my
what
motto.
happened when she saw the new offer that you told her she shouldn't look at?
Well, she didn't, I said, you know, you're not gonna wanna see it, so I'm just not even gonna send it to you, I'm not even gonna meet with you, nothing, and we're just not, we're gonna ignore it and just let it die. And she said, and I knew that she has to get it, right, so, I mean, she had to see it, she had to present all offers. And, so she called me back, and she goes, okay, just send it over.
Did she respond?
Yeah.
What'd she say?
What are these people thinking? I said, I don't know, what do you think they're thinking?
So even at this point, you don't feel like you were in a good position to say, hey, well, maybe this is where the market is at, and this is what the market's telling us.
At this, yeah, because we just got another offer, so yeah, I think we're definitely at that position right now. And I've been telling them that, but they don't wanna hear it, so. It's not always easy, guys. It's simple, and we know what has to happen, but it's not always easy, unfortunately.
You have to be ready for everything.
You what?
You have to be ready for everything, to say yes, to say no, to
Yeah.
decline everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So on page 17, they're also talking about give your offer the best chance, be confident and committed to your offer as you present it. Avoid indicating to the other side if you believe it is a less than great offer for them. And I would agree with that 99% of the time. But I had to do something different with this particular situation, because had I said, oh, this is a great offer, she would have
Lost it, yeah.
lit me up, right? Total, I'd still be glowing from that conversation, and I knew that because I've gotten to know them through the process. So, yeah, so it's always
So
fun.
does that also apply to when you're dealing with the other agent? Cause what you just said now, I think you were applying to your client.
Applying to the client, yes.
I'm assuming that applies to the other agent as well. Don't indicate by any stretch that you think that this is a good or bad deal that's being made, or offer that's being made.
Well, I think it depends. I mean, if you're really off base and you're just going in after a really low ball offer and you're trying to steal the property, then how can you say it with good faith that you think it's a good offer? But if it does comp out and it does look like the numbers work with that particular house, then I would go in and say, I think this is a great offer. I think they should take it. Yeah, definitely. And this is what they think it's worth, and that's what we're gonna do. That's where we are, and I think it's a really good offer. But you have to be able to support it, I think.
Sure.
And most of the time, you will support it because the numbers make sense. The numbers don't lie.
Yeah, it's so interesting, because even in that regard, to use the example of the situation I'm in, when I first was getting ready to make an offer to the other agent, we did the numbers and the numbers checked out, but when I kind of started feeling her out about like what she thought about it, she kind of mentioned in passing that this is her third deal with the seller and that they are investors. And I was like, cause I asked her, what's it gonna take to get this deal done? And she's like, well, you know, I've worked with them 3 times now, and they typically are open to working with people, and So I would just say, you know, make your best offer and, you know, we'll see where we land. So to me, that communicated that we didn't necessarily have to come in and asking. We could at least explore what the another option was. But like I told you, my buyers were just like, I don't want to even risk the chance of losing it.
Yeah, and they made the right decision. I totally think that they made the right decision.
But in that situation, do you think do you think if the agent was communicating that they're very much open to like looking at offers?
Yeah,
That's a
because
signal, don't you think?
that was exactly what she was saying to you, I think, and in addition to that, it's supported because it proved out to be true,
Right.
okay?
Or in what sense?
Well, I mean, you didn't have to go above ask, you went and asked and you got the property. If it were a lot of offers coming in, it would have pushed it probably above ask at that particular point. And maybe you could have gotten it for less. Chances are you could have gotten it for less, but at this point, they wanted it so badly, it really didn't matter to
Right.
them. And how much less would you have gotten it? How much less would you have gone in?
We're gonna just go ask for 10 less.
10 less.
Yeah.
And $10,000 over the course of a 30-year loan, is it worth the
Right.
possibility of losing a house? It's really not.
Right.
So I think you played it perfectly. I give you gold stars. Perfect. Now just get past this little negotiation on the repairs and you're good to go,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
On page 18 is talking about nonverbal clues, and what percentage of our communication is nonverbal? Do you guys, does
Like
anybody know?
80%.
80%. So, I mean, I know it's really high. So nonverbal is so critical whenever we're paying attention to what people are saying to us. And it's pretty interesting the way some people will react to different things. But in the time that we have allotted, which I think that's about 5 minutes, write down as many nonverbal clues or cues, body language, tone of voice, rate of speech as possible that suggest the negotiation is going in a positive or negative direction. So what are some of the things that would create the situation where you would think it would be positive?
Sorry, are we talking about, we're talking about negotiation, are we talking about between ourselves and the other agent, or ourselves and our?
This is just generic.
It's general.
So if you're talking about nonverbal clues, it can be in communication all day. So let's just say you're having with a friend and you're taking nonverbal cues all the time from other people that you're speaking with. And a lot of times they're positive and sometimes you'll see them kind of ruffle up a little bit and they get negative. What are some of those clues? And it doesn't just have to be in negotiations, it can be just in day-to-day life.
Well, I'll give you an
because-
example from my days before I was a married man. And whenever a woman, you know, either is like touching her hair or like leaning towards you or seems to be like leaning into the conversation, I would say that's a positive sign.
Yeah,
But if for whatever reason she keeps moving away further and further and like is a little bit more distant, then I think that's not the best sign. But you know, the little hair toss and all that stuff, I think that's good.
so how, and I would totally agree with you. So how would that relate to business?
So when you're talking to someone, and if you can feel their warmth, or if you can feel that they're receiving what you're saying, then that's usually a good sign. In terms of their eye contact, their engagement, that's a good sign that whatever you're saying is being received, well accepted.
Yes. So, but I think it's the same thing. When people are agreeing, they usually move in, right, for a closer conversation, look you closer in the eye. That's a good thing. When they push back and they're getting away
Arms
from
crossed.
you and the arms are crossed, or you just see them do this, then you know it's not a good thing. So that's some of them. What are some of the other things that might happen let's just say you're sitting with a seller at the table and you've given them an offer that is not great. What might be another negative cue that you would see from them?
Sighing, heavy breathing. I think the most effective negotiators, which is kind of what we were getting at earlier when we were talking about that guy,
Uh-huh.
are the ones that don't give you anything. That don't show you any up or downs and you have to guess for yourself.
Yeah, and that's really hard to do sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And you don't get this very often though.
Yeah.
Most negotiations don't go like that. I mean, they can become, and I don't care how experienced they are in negotiation, they may have experienced major multi-million, billion-dollar deals, and they still become emotional at the table, and you see that you see it, you can just see it happen if you're there with them watching. Over the phone, not so much, you know, sometimes. And if it becomes a heated situation and they're pretty upset with something that's maybe going on in the negotiation, I'm not gonna continue having that over the phone, I'm gonna set up a face-to-face.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because what will happen is, face-to-face, generally, they're not as explosive or as irritated or upset. So generally, you can work through it a lot easier face-to-face than if you're on the telephone. So I agree with that. So what are some positive gestures? We talked a little bit about positive,
Negative.
flipping your hair. What are other positive gestures?
I don't believe actually negative or positive. I never been real estate, but I don't believe in negative or positive. It depends on you, how you handle and how to finish it.
You know, that's a really interesting perception. I love what you just said. So you don't believe in negative or positive.
Even though if they show they are not happy to sign you something, I don't care. I'm sitting there, I drink my coffee and give him coffee, I give him whatever I could do.
To make them not
To make
negative
them
anymore.
relax, it's up to them. They want to sign it, fine. They don't want tomorrow, come sign it. They don't want to sign it, okay. My time, I learn something from them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't believe negative. I believe always positive. If negative comes, so God didn't want it, that's it. We say Gam Zola Tova. God
So
didn't want it.
then, but how, and I'm just curious about this really is not this, because we're talking about buyers and the sellers, but in terms of your feelings inside, after you look at it as positive, and then let's say the deal doesn't come together
You
and
have
they
to
walk
be ready
away,
for negative also.
then how do you
Of course.
feel? Do you feel
I
negative,
should feel
positive,
that-
or indifferent?
So you see, always when you lose the deal, you get upset.
Do
Then
you
no
get
one-
upset when you lose the deal?
Of course,
Okay.
not that upset that show them that I'm very upset, I put my time for you, why you don't sign? So he doesn't want to sign it. You cannot push anybody.
No, you certainly cannot. You certainly can't.
And a lot of time that I saw people are very negative, but at the end they are so good. And I saw some people, they were so positive, we want to do it, and then you see that, I have to think about it, let me think another 2 nights, 3 nights. It depends on you, how you handle the
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, I try to
That
close
is
it
my
before it
belief.
goes
I
2 or
don't-
3 nights, but sometimes you can't. But that's a good take on it, I appreciate that. On page 19, it talks about identifying tactics and user counter tactics. You know, and so much of this is just natural that I don't even like to really think through it a lot of times, because I think some of it's kind of silly when you think about it. I think just by human nature, and I'm interested in how you guys feel about that. Do you think just by our own just being people and being who we are, that we're getting the feedback mostly anyway, rather than identifying it as nibbling? I don't even know what nibbling is, but we're gonna find out here in just a minute. They're saying that nibbling is once your client has agreed upon one major concession, the other party will start nibbling for additional smaller concessions. And that was kind of what he was talking about earlier, you know, they're going in asking for a lot of little things too. So that's probably nibbling, I guess. What about the hot potato? Who would like to read that?
What is the hot potato?
The hot potato.
What is it?
Anybody, you have the hot potato in front of you, notice?
The other party tries to pass a problem onto you. For example, the crop agent tries to pass all closing costs to your client because their client can't afford them.
Right, and what would be a resolution to that?
No. Ask them why they wanna pass out the money, chances are that they are not ready to buy, if they pass all the cost to you, either they don't know, or they don't have enough money, so they may not be
I
a
have
good
the
customer.
answer for you.
Maybe we should see if it is real or not.
Yeah, that's number one. Is it real, or is this
Yeah.
really a problem? Is it
But
really not
why
a
you
problem?
should start with something like this, you shouldn't start it at all.
We are on
If
page.
you want to buy a house, $1 million, you
Yes.
have to prove that you can buy it, correct?
Correct.
So you wouldn't have problem in that time. But if you don't find it out and don't follow it, then you might get trouble in that time. Then we cannot afford it.
Yeah, and
You
that's,
understand what I mean?
yeah, definitely.
You have to
Um,
make sure that they could afford it before you go to a school or to go for signature or for offer.
But what if it comes down to the end and it's just a little minute detail that you still have to work out? Then sometimes you have to. I mean, sometimes you get to that point when you're at the end of the negotiation and there's this one little thing, and that one little thing can make or break the deal, right?
Little thing like what?
Well, I mean, I've told you guys this, cause it was probably one of my worst, was when I had a deal go down over bar stools that were probably $30 bar stools. I don't know, they were not expensive bar
For
stools.
$30, you let the deal goes away? I would pay
I
from my
didn't, no,
pocket.
I said,
I
no,
pay
I
from
will
my
go buy
pocket.
you the bar.
I said, okay, I pay for it.
Right, and that's what I
$30,
said.
$50, $100, $2,000, I pay for it.
At that point, it didn't matter though, why?
The pride in the dollar.
Pride, ego,
Yeah.
emotion. It was too late, because when they came back and said they weren't gonna leave the bar stools, most people would say, well, that's not a big deal, right? These buyers said, no, I want the bar stools or I'm not buying this house. I mean, it's ridiculous. It really truly happened. And I promise, cause it was my deal, and they walked away and I said, you guys, come on, it's like 3 bar stools, I'll give you whatever, to go buy bar stools so the deal doesn't go down. They said it's not about the bar stools anymore. We just don't wanna buy from them because they're just,
So find him another place, that's it.
well, yeah,
That's not
then you
too
have
bad.
to move on.
Look for another place for them.
Uh,
If the agent knows what he's doing, maybe it wouldn't happen like that at the end.
Hello?
Yeah, maybe not, maybe.
Depends on the agent, how experienced he is and how he could make them to trust the agent, whatever he said. That's very important.
Yeah, it
Very
is.
good.
But sometimes it just happens and it's just not gonna come together, and you have to accept that, and that's when you have to lick your wounds
You
and
have
go
to be
home and
ready
start
for it,
over
of
again.
course.
Did you guys already address the counter tactic for the hot potato?
Yes.
That you are talking about hot potato.
Yeah, what would you do if they try to pass off the closing cost to you?
That's what I said.
That's what Netta was talking about. She said find out if it's a real issue or not, and if it's something you really do have to deal with, and would you deal with it or not? When would you deal with it?
If, personally, if eating that cost still made sense with the numbers, and then I might consider it, but it could be pretty sizable, right? Closing costs are like what, 1 to 2% of the value of the home?
Yeah, I mean, they can become substantial.
Yeah.
But it's also a substantial deal, so if you've got the numbers that support it, I would say yes, do it,
It's kind of
And
tricky.
again, it
because-
depends on the market, we're
Yeah.
not in the same market, a year ago, we would've said, no closing costs, absolutely not. But now would you consider it maybe in certain micro markets in LA, you might.
But is that established at the beginning of escrow, before escrow, midway through? Because
Generally during the offer. Usually they write the offer with the closing costs included in
I
it.
see, okay. Because once you're in escrow, I feel like the stakes are already too high to go back on all the time spent.
Yeah, absolutely. So generally that comes in at the very beginning of the initial offer.
Yeah.
Or somewhere during the negotiations,
Right.
in that initial stages. So the good guy, bad guy, who would like to read about the good guy, bad guy?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Two people working together, for example, a husband and wife, will take an opposing road. One appears friendly and considerate, while the other behaves in a difficult or aggressive manner. Think of the typical car salesperson, good guy, who says his manager, bad guy, won't let him reduce the price any further.
It happens.
Happens all the time.
All the time, good guy, bad guy. It's really a tactic that people even talk about, alright, you're gonna be the good guy, I'm gonna be the bad guy.
Bad guy's even often a phantom, unseen character.
Yeah, cause I have to go back to my manager, you may not have to ever go back to your manager, you may make the decision on your own, but it's a great cop-out when you don't wanna give your answer, right? So, or your answer's going to be not something they like. So you're right, it's a good way to
Best way to say that, I don't know, I talk to some people, see what I could do for you, to show yourself that you're concerned about the buyer or whatever, seller.
Yeah.
You have to be always good guy, not bad guy. When you make decision right away or give them the decision right away, you get bad guy. But if you tell them, okay, let me see what I could do, let me either talk to them, I call you later on, or I will see you tomorrow. So even though if you come with the same answer, at least you tried, you are a good guy. But if you give them right away, either you call them, you say, no, they are not going, of course, they say you are
Then
bad
you're the
guy.
bad guy, right? Yes, definitely. Some of the things, tactics on the other side, so they're saying you're working with a good guy, bad guy, and they recommend, they being Ignite instructors, whoever wrote this, call them on their game. You can even say, come on, you're not going to play good guy, bad guy, are you?
Oh, okay.
Would you say that?
I want to be good guy all the time.
Okay, so you don't have to worry. But would the rest of you say that, good guy, bad guy?
I think it's worth trying.
Yeah, I do too. If you continue, then attribute what the bad guy says to the good guy, since they're a tag team anyway. And this likely will diffuse the tactic because you now have two bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
So you just need a position. That's interesting, isn't it? Communication is such a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
We could just spend the rest of our lives just studying how to communicate with one another. Might make the world a better place, right? Number 3 is position on page 20. We're in 19.
One more thing about that before you go on.
Yes.
Is that, you think that's worth identifying even before they go back to their boss? Or should we wait to hear what they have to say first?
When they say they're going back to their boss to check on something, I might see what they have to say, because otherwise, if you do it
Can't
right
preempt
then.
it.
But if you're trying to preempt it, what are you saying to them?
I already know you're full of
BSing
it.
me?
Yeah,
Yeah, and that puts them in a position of
they're not
what?
gonna wanna help you either way at that point.
Yeah, I think do you think it would tick them off?
Probably,
Probably,
it would piss me off.
yeah. So if you're saying I have to go back to my manager and you really don't, or maybe you do, but you're saying, no, you
Yeah.
really don't. Yeah, I think if that were me and it were really true, it would really upset me. You're not gonna know that, cause I'm not gonna show you, but inside me, it might upset me.
Mhm.
So that definitely could be, a tactic, but you know, this all sounds so, to me, just canned, and as you go through negotiations, it's very natural. You
Mhm.
know, this sounds like you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, and all these things really happen very natural, just by us being human beings and caring about the other people that we're presenting things to. Hi, Anthony. Okay? Alright. Positioning is moving both parties closer to each other until you have full agreement. And that's the reason sometimes you will negotiate for a couple of days or longer to try to bring them together. And it's not unusual to have in a normal market. And, you know, we have not been in a normal market. We're getting ready to go into a normal market. I don't know if you guys saw the stats from CAR this morning. Did anybody see that? If you just look at your emails, and it came from CAR, and it was talking about, that we're at the lowest that we've been since 2015 in home sales right now. So that tells us that we're not only declining through California, but LA is seeing a decline too. So when you look at the numbers, we know that we're declining, and of course that puts more inventory into the marketplace. And what typically happens when that happens?
Interest rates will drop.
Interest rates will drop. What else?
Inventory drops, it's not selling, there's more profit in the market.
Interest
right now.
rates.
Oh, interest rate, yes, yes. But right now, they said that the January prices have gone up 2%. They said on the radio, which even though the sales is down from last year, but the price has gone up 2%.
But is that a false increase in pricing? Is it going to go back down? How can you have numbers of sales going down and pricing going up?
Hmm.
I mean,
Inflation
economics
over
101
time.
says that doesn't work,
Don't know, yeah.
because we're looking at a really short time, a micro market, so how can that even be possible? I'm curious, you guys are smart, well, how is that even possible? Help me out
What's
here.
your question?
What?
What's your question?
So, John said we know that the number of sales are going down, but he said the prices have gone up 2%.
January,
Gone
yeah.
up year over year or like?
No, the month of January, they said that's
But the
what.
question is.
That doesn't make sense.
But most of this,
Doesn't make sense.
most of this statistic is not correct, where they say, everybody says different. CARD says something, then the National Association of NAR says something else. So it really, I mean,
And that makes sense, John, because NAR is looking at the entire nation.
I see,
right.
NAR is more,
They're looking at everything, and California is never the same as the rest of the country. It just is not. So NAR is looking at the entire nation. CAR is looking at California, and our local board is looking only at our little board here, which is what, Beverly Hills. Our board is basically Beverly Hills. So that's what they're looking at. But then you take those areas and you look at the little markets within those, because they all have tiny little markets, you know, like in LA that we're dealing with. So it does, you know, come into play exactly to where we are. But if prices are going down or the market is becoming stagnant, it's gonna adjust one way or another, right? And I think we're going through that right now.
2019 goes down for sure.
You what?
2019, this year, goes down.
Goes down.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. So positioning and vote in, on page 20, and until you get full agreement, we're gonna try to negotiate this deal. But what I was getting ready to say is in a normal market, which we're kinda heading towards a normal market right now, I think, that it's not unusual maybe to be $50,000 apart and come together in the middle. And that's just through going back and forth, and we're not used to that because we're used to going into an offer, writing an offer, giving it out, going into multiple counters, and then you win or you lose. And that's not a real market, you know, that's not true in most markets. So what will happen is you'll make an offer, you come back, go back and forth, and eventually, hopefully you end up at a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
A price that the seller can live with and a price that the buyer can live with. And then all of a sudden, that's a true negotiation. And that's not really much of what we've experienced over the last couple of years at all. So it's kind of exciting to get back to that for a couple of reasons. You know what my number one reason would be that that's so exciting? Anyone?
Sorry, say that one more time?
What would make it so exciting, in my opinion, that we're going into a market where we're actually starting to negotiate again versus just putting offers out that get accepted or not accepted? Does it weed out the bad agents?
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you don't know how to negotiate, you're not gonna stay in the business. It's going to get rid of a lot of bad agents, and that's really great. Or agents that come in and wanna do one deal a year, or 2 deals a year. List their aunt's house. It happens all the time. We're coming in for the flexible hours, because they only have to work 3 hours a day to make $200,000 a year or whatever. And that's not the real world. So now what we're starting to experience is the real world. And that's when negotiations really come into play, and it will separate the men from the boys and the women from the girls. So, as you go through this negotiation, it says to ask what and how questions. What are some of the what and how questions we might ask as we're going into the negotiations, or sitting at a negotiation table?
And again, we're assuming we're dealing with the other agent?
At this point, we're dealing with, buyers and sellers. So what would be some of the what and how questions we would ask them?
I still
So
understand.
you're representing the seller
Yeah.
or the buyer,
Mhm.
and they're still pushing back.
Oh, I
So
see.
what are some of the questions you might ask them to try to move them towards where they need to be?
What would it take for you to be comfortable with a deal like this?
Very good question. What else might you ask them? Because this is understanding position in the marketplace too. So think about, we're in a changing market. Prices are appearing to come down in certain areas of LA. And so the sellers are still thinking what? High price, right? And the buyers are thinking low price, and you have to try to bring them together.
How important is it for you to move out of this house in the next month?
Yeah, and then take that one step further, and if you decide not to sell now, when might the prices be back where they are right now?
Mhm.
What could that look like? we don't know. All we know is what we have today. So we know right now, today, this is what you can get, but what if you wait, and in 6 months, it's not worth what it is right now? How would you feel about that? It's pretty scary, isn't it? Because we don't know, I mean, it could go up, but with the way the economy's going, and Isaac gave us his prediction, market going down, and I tend to agree with that, because that's kind of what's been happening, even though there's been little flutters of it going up and down and up and down. So now would be a really good time to make a decision to go ahead and do something, correct? Especially for sellers. It says here that positioning is a process and sometimes requires you to come back to the negotiating table more than once. And that's when the real negotiations are going on, which is what we're dealing with now. And know when to walk away. You're not always gonna win. At what point would you walk away?
That's always the toughest question, I don't know.
Yeah, it's so hard. Isaac, when would you walk away?
The buyer walks away or
If you had the buyer or seller, you've come to the negotiations, it's just not working out, when do you walk away?
I let them go today. Tonight I call them, say how you doing. I hope that you are happy. So tomorrow let's go again. I try to make a better price for you. Whatever is there is problem, I fix the problem.
So what I'm hearing is never,
If
never
not,
let them go away.
but if not, okay, I show you somewhere else.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be this place.
When
There's
do you
so
s-
many houses, so many, I don't know, whatever.
When do you stop, Anthony? When you're in a stalemate in negotiations, what would make you stop? What would make you say, okay, I get it, we're done?
There's a lot of things.
Okay, one,
Come up with a solution that may help to solve the problem, and give you a choice, that's the only solution, either you have to come up with a price, or you have to look in the other area. Then you find out that you can,
So you could, if you're in the middle of a negotiation, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
When do you stop? I mean, either when the problem is solved, you come up with a solution like he was saying,
okay,
or if things are about to escalate and you guys start arguing and things are complicated, then maybe the deal should just
it's
stop.
not
Yeah.
gonna work out. I mean, there are times when you just can't make it happen.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see what I think? This is platinum, correct?
Mhm.
Can I get rid of this ever? Never. Besides, if they give me big money. So it's better always to stay here. So my customers supposed to be with me all the time. If they leave me, they're different. But I never leave them. I don't care what the situation is. Never give up.
Okay. I love that. Never leave.
Customer is gold. You cannot leave them. Let them leave you if they don't want you.
True. So, as we talk about positioning, and, we do have to decide at one point that there is a chance that we would have to walk away. On page 21, it talks about, practicing position, and what we need to do is choose a partner, and we have 2, 4, 6, so it works out perfectly. The scenario is, well, first of all, we're gonna take a few minutes to review the scenario and information about your role, because we're gonna do a little role playing. Thank you for coming. We're gonna take a few minutes to, talk about a little bit what we've learned so far, or review what we've learned so far in today. Present your case to your partner and practice positioning. So go back and forth. The scenario is, the property has 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, and is listed at $350,000. And the house requires new carpeting throughout the first floor and a new garage door opener. 3 offers have been made, but all were below asking. Sounds like an offer today for me. In the buyer's agent role, your buyers are making an offer of $340,000 for the house. They have been pre-approved. The buyers would like to close in the shortest time possible since they're moving away from the state and need a home for their family. Since they're leaving their appliances, the buyers would also like all of the appliances to be included. And so one of you's gonna be a buyer agent, one's gonna be the listing agent. The listing agent role is your sellers have raised their family in the house you're selling, have many friends and families in the area. The children are all grown now, so they don't need the amount of space that they currently have. and have purchased a home in Florida. They would like to give all the appliances to their daughter, who has just gone through a divorce. They will not be moving until they have sold their current home. And though they would like to get to Florida as soon as possible, they are ready to stand their ground regarding the price. Yeah, so how do you deal with that? So I'm gonna give you guys to talk back and forth, and you can play both sides, or you can be one or the other. They're already at it. So I guess we could do it here together.
What would you do?
What would you do, Isaac? Okay, so I'm the listing agent, and you have the buyer agent, and you're trying to work through this with us. Or back, so you guys can work through it. So who wants to be the buyer's agent, who wants to be the
I can
listing
be
agent?
either.
Huh?
I can be either.
Okay, take your pick.
So I'm seller, what would you do?
Sure.
You're the listing agent.
Listen, what would you do?
Anthony? What would you do? Okay, so I'm the listing agent, and you're the buyer's agent.
You wanna negotiate with me?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the question?
Okay, so,
Yeah,
well, I'll
so
play the
I,
listing agent, and you're my seller, so.
Okay.
My clients have
All right,
decided to make an
so
offer.
here's the deal.
For
They
340,
want you to leave the
and,
appliance.
we're
Did you hear the
deciding
story?
to go. I know it's been on the market for a
Didn't
little
hear the
bit,
story.
but we, you guys are
It's okay.
motivated,
Um,
and we're motivated, so it's match made in heaven.
They're $10,000 off of price, and the buyers want them to leave the, appliances
They want more money.
in the house, and,
They're
but
ten-
they want,
The sellers-
$10,000
so
off
you're
on
telling me the
price?
sellers
Yeah.
want more money?
As in,
Well, you know,
as in-
$350 versus
Short?
we priced the house and we looked at it, and given where the market's
lower
kind
than
of
asked.
going for the last couple
And
of
they
months, we
want
feel
these
that
sellers to leave the appliances.
slightly
The
below
sellers do not
asking,
wanna
but
leave the
it's a
appliances
fair-
because they wanna give the
you know, you
appliances
guys
to
have
their
a sitting there
daughter.
off,
so the
right?
the buyers are offering less
So-
money and they want the appliances?
You know, I think it's cool working.
Okay,
Like I said,
what
my,
else?
my buyers are.
The seller said no, they wanna leave it for their,
And the sellers are,
We're gonna minimize
going to
your
Florida.
escrow period as much as we
They're
can.
going to Florida,
Okay.
and they've already bought a house there, but they're ready to stand their ground regarding the price. They don't wanna come down with the price. So, what we, I'm the seller, and you're my listing agent, what would you say to me?
Thank you, and, you know, I think another thing to ask.
I would say,
is, especially since we don't have any other offers.
don't tell them no yet.
Do we wanna
Let's
risk the
hold on
chance
to that offer
we
and
can
think about
lose
it.
out on this? 'Cause my
But we
buyers are
still
really
have other
motivated
people
right
that
now.
are
And
probably
we're looking at
going
a
to
couple-
make
we're looking at a
offers.
couple other places.
So let's
And they
wait
love your place.
and see what else comes
But
in to us.
Because we're kind of in a time
If any,
crunch.
if, you know,
and
if there's
their lease is expired on
nothing
their
that
current
comes
place,
through,
we need a place to go.
then
So,
as a last minute
you're our
decision,
first choice,
we may
but
be able to
we're gonna have to
negotiate
look at other
something with
options as
them.
well, assuming that it's
Probably
not-
get a little bit more money from them and leave maybe half of the appliances, not all of the appliances.
That would be fantastic, cause we wanna work with you guys first, you guys are our
Yeah,
first
I
choice.
mean, that would be one solution. What else might you say to them?
I have your word.
What is your price?
As the listing agent.
Yes.
What would I say to the offers, the like the buyers?
You what?
To the buyers, right?
And that's all I can ask. I
No, you're
appreciate
my
that.
listing agent, you're trying to sell the buyers, or not sell.
Yeah.
You're negotiating with them, and they come back with this offer to you, which you have to present to me, and it's either a win-win, or it's not a
I can't
win, or
promise
it's a
that
bad
because we
deal.
need to,
It's
they
up
need a place to go, I
everyone
can't have my
at the
clients be
table to
homeless.
decide that.
They're gonna be homeless, they're gonna have to.
So,
Does there
I
have to
can
be,
give you that.
does a decision have to be made now, right now?
I promise you that we won't commit anything.
well, I mean,
I'll
there's
be
usually a
looking.
time frame on it, so if you don't have to make it by 5 o'clock, let's just do tomorrow.
Alright,
If I'm just the agent,
The only problem is on the washing and
I mean, I would
drying.
talk to the buyer,
Okay, so-
or my.
Seller.
The seller.
You represent the seller.
Yeah,
I'm the-
and it's really up to them. If they don't have to get rid of the property, then don't agree to that
how do you,
offer.
what's your thought on making it easy?
See if we can get something better.
out of my
Just
green.
give them
But if
a
nothing else
vote
comes
that
through,
you
then let's
sign
negotiate
$2,000
and see if we can get more money, since they want the appliances. I mean, there's not much you can really do. You either say no and get nothing,
Or renegotiate the back end.
or renegotiate, yeah. Try to get more money if you're going to leave the appliances, or,
Say no, I might go, and that's it.
No, that's great.
But if you give them,
That's great.
chance,
Yeah.
for both.
Suzanne, the
So,
only
yes.
thing, the only thing is the washer and dryer problem, huh?
Down to the washer and dryer, okay, so
I mean,
did you
the
guys
price
negotiate the
agreed
deal?
on $340,000, right?
I'm sorry?
350, they come down to 340.
Yes.
So the only thing is that the washer and dryer. And you don't wanna break the deal for washer and dryer.
Well, I
So, I mean, the guy wants to give it to $1 and the buyer wants the washer and dryer. So maybe you as an agent say that, okay, well, I'm willing to give a couple of $1,000, the washer and dryer costs about $4,000, $5,000. I come up with $2,000 and you come up with $2,000. We buy a new washer and dryer for your daughter, and you don't need to worry about taking them out and.
So that's a good resolution if you wanna give up part of your money, right?
Yeah, well, if they, I mean, you wanna make a deal, not necessarily, I mean, you say that, I am a deal maker, but what other thing that we can do to make a deal? If they both are stubborn,
And they always are at that point. Once you get to that point, they're all stubborn. Everybody's stubborn, right? Don't you think, pretty much?
yeah, but this is only $4,000, $5,000 for washing and dryer.
Well, yeah, it's true, but they're also putting this on a $340,000 house. So the commission on this house is not gonna be the commissions you're used to seeing.
Right.
So if you end up buying a washer and dryer, it could take a lot of your commission to make that happen.
But does it depend on the agent? If the agent, the buyers or seller, they love him, they would help him. For $2,000, they wouldn't let me pay for it.
You'd be surprised.
I don't know.
Mostly, yes.
I never sold house, but I was in other situations that I wanted to pay from my pocket, they didn't let me do it. They didn't let me. Say no. They paid. They said, okay, let me pay. I don't know.
Yeah.
That depends on the person, how to treat them, how to become friendly with them.
It does. It all
Give
depends on
this
the
technique,
person
you
and
know.
how you go down that garden path with them because it
Let's
can
see what
be-
the agent doesn't let it go in that way. First, he has to see everything there in the house, what's happening, and let the buyer know. Some agent, they don't want to tell them there is problem, somewhere.
True.
They want, somehow it's cheating. They don't tell them. It's not right. If the agent tell them, they appreciate that.
Yeah,
Maybe
you,
between 10 buyers, one goes away, but another 9 would stay with you, and they love you. Next time they come back to you, they would bring their friends.
yeah,
When
and
you're
that's what
honest
you're
to
hoping
them,
for in this business.
Give
That's
them
what you
the
strive
right
for.
answers, you never get in that problem. In the time of
Problem.
offer, they get that problem, that's it, the agent for that.
Yeah.
I'm not an agent, I never sold houses, but that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and you're probably onto something with that. On page 22, we're talking about negotiating a counteroffer, and it says that let's see. Your client has found the house they love. This is the buyer agent. Buyer agent's client has found the house they love in the neighborhood they want. It's at the top of their price range and needs some work, updating the kitchen and the master bedroom. Your client makes an offer on the property and the seller's agent says, I must warn you that we have gotten several offers and your offer is really low. Listing agent scenario is your sellers need to move within 45 days to a job transfer. You feel like you have priced the house competitively. You're aware the house needs updating, but the sellers don't see the need because the house was just fine for them. They have multiple offers, and the offers are still standing, but the timing may not work out for the seller, and the latest offer is lower than the asking price, but the timing's good. So you have let the buyer's agent know, must warn you that I've gotten several offers and your offer is pretty low. So you wanna do that with each other and then switch it off, that would be great, so.
Just learn from you.
Hmm?
Just learn from you.
Alright.
So your clients found the house they love.
Which one did
I got
it?
it.
Whatever you feel. Which one is easier, let me do.
Hmm?
Seller.
You wanna be seller? So you can be listing agent? Oh, this is the negotiating a counteroffer?
Yes.
Okay.
Alright, so.
Take it or leave it. That's it.
Okay.
That's it?
So, we
Cool,
don't
okay.
place.
Got it.
Going far,
Take
Anthony.
it or leave it,
So
got it, alright.
we made an offer accordingly.
Offer's pretty low. Well,
So our offer reflects, market, in addition to the cost it would take to make the repairs that would bring it to market value. Right now, it's priced with the offer that we make, it prices it as if we were going to make the fixes ourselves.
But we have to make adjustments.
So, if you're telling me you want us to go back to what you asked, then you would need to make all those repairs. If you're comfortable with that, then that works for us too.
Saying, hey, look what this is gonna cost, $5,000, this costs $10,000, whatever needs to be fixed or done, and then tell them that's why you're offering that pricing off.
And also, I was to my seller, and I asked him to get
To
lower.
make the repairs.
I would do that, but I know how my buyer feels pretty
We have a higher
serious
offer.
about this.
We have two
And
higher offers, so
we're not in a
why would
rush
we
to,
fix
we're not in a
it?
rush to move it anywhere. They love this place, but we're not gonna make another offer if it means that we're not
My
gonna.
seller is very hard person, but please, both of us is right.
It's $10,000. We're losing $10,000 and
You know what
the
makes this hard?
appliances by working.
I like you, I like you,
And that's not bad.
but the deal I don't like, because it's not, and you know the way we make this deal work is that we have to account, because you have to be honest with yourself.
How would you choose?
That the value needs to reflect the fact that the repairs haven't been made.
Okay.
Because we can't move it in this condition,
So I told you, I promise you, I will talk to the seller.
and I'll take that.
But, in the meantime, you try your best too. What
I can bring this up to them, I know I gotta be careful because I know they're not gonna like it.
Okay, so let's talk about it. What
I can bring it
I
up.
understand that
I can let them know.
they really don't wanna go.
I also
for
don't
that,
want
you
them
know,
to walk away
honestly,
from the
I think
deal.
there's probably
Because right now, it's a good,
other offers.
right now, it's a
Is
good,
there
right
anything
now,
at all that you
they're
can
open
think
to
of
this, but if I
that
come back
would
with this
make a
information, they might
difference to my
wanna walk away
sellers?
entirely, they might even fire me. You don't want me to get fired.
Stephen, close faster, I mean, do they have cash, can they
I'll
come
take
to
that.
the table with cash and close in 10 days?
I'll take that.
So I guess it comes down to terms on the situation.
It
I mean,
could,
the scenario
it
says
could
that,
come down to terms, it
the
may
scenario
just
says
be
that
price and,
I have to defend me coming in low, and you have to.
If I was the seller, I would need to, it doesn't make sense.
no, it doesn't.
But if I could get cash quicker, then that might be more important to me.
It might be, and closing sooner.
Because I'm also in a
possibly.
transition myself, to use that cash, 'cause I'm-
Can I hear your thoughts out loud also, on the scenario?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. We were just talking about trade-offs, and so if we can't get them up on price, or the,
You were selling agent?
seller down on price, I was a listing agent, right? We were just kind of going back and forth. And I suggested that maybe if they had cash, close in 10 days, maybe no inspections.
Oh, snap, hell no.
So then what kind of difference would that make?
I mean, that's
Or
too.
would it?
It might, maybe not. I think as a buyer, that's too sketchy.
Why?
To say no inspections. How do I know I'm not buying a dump? Too risky.
Or, okay,
Website is
let's take away no
already
inspections, what about a shortened inspection period? So we're going through 17 days to 7 days, on the inspection period, we're paying you all cash, cause in 15 days. But we're not coming up on price and we want the appliances.
So it comes to terms is what we decided, because, if you're gonna offer $10,000 less than your competitor, then of course, I mean, that, I would not give that.
How are you making it worth their while?
You have to make it up some way, right?
Yeah, cause if I was a seller, I wouldn't give to this guy who's paying $10,000 less, that makes no sense. But if I could get the cash quicker than this guy over here, that would help me. I'm also in transition myself, cause I'm also probably moving.
Online, I mean,
Is that cash? Instead of waiting long time. So it comes to
Online,
terms.
yeah, to Facebook, and I'm gonna.
It really does, you know, the thing is you can negotiate almost anything. Hey guys, how did you do back there? How did you work it out, or
I-
did you?
We said that because it's only the washer and the dryer and both are stable and the guy needs to help his daughter. I was a little bit of compassion and saying that I will, first of all, we appraise how much the washer and dryer is. With the old ones, you don't wanna, we convince him that it's not worth to carry this one to the new home for your daughter. You have to pay for the plumbing, you have to pay for hookup, it costs a lot of money. So why don't we just put up the money together, $5,000, or
Who's putting up the money, you?
Laura put half of it.
You're putting up half of it,
Make it
okay.
deal.
All
I'm
right.
always generous.
So did you come to terms, did you work it out? Did you say yes?
Yes, she agreed with that, she said.
You did agree with it, just to get it over with probably, right? Let's get this baby wrapped up. And a lot of times it comes to that. You know, a lot of times the negotiations will come to the complete finish, just because they're so sick of it, they just don't wanna deal with it anymore. And then do you have usually an angry buyer or seller? Probably, yes, definitely. Okay, so that kinda gets us through the negotiation period. Questions? Ahas, and did you get anything out of this today?
Yes.
Like what?
Think outside the box. No,
Yeah.
it expands your thought process, cause some people think so minute and on specific details when they should, you know, like, I didn't really think about the term situation. You know, I was only thinking about what we
Two
can get.
things, right?
Yeah,
The price and the appliances.
yeah.
But what if I could do this, could we,
Right.
right? So sometimes you really have to think outside the box. If that's really that important
Really
to
know
them.
all of your angles is what it is.
Yeah, I think so too.
All your approaches.
I learned that to some extent, I'm referencing everything in relation to what I'm going through now.
Yes.
To some extent, the agent that I'm dealing with has used the good guy, bad guy thing on me.
Oh, he has?
She has. Because, she's dealing with an investor. So every time I talk about like, well, why are we doing this? Or like, what do you think about this? She's like, I'm sorry, you know, I have to also be honest that my interaction with the seller is also very kind of distant. And I'm not getting much from them either, so they're like a corporate, it's almost a corporate company
Uh-huh.
that I have to just kind of email and wait for replies. And so she's also, I kind of want to sympathize for her to some extent. And if that's strategic, then she's pretty smart.
Do you think it's strategic or true?
I think it's true, but it doesn't change the fact that it's
Still
also strategic.
You know, a lot of times strategy happens quite by accident.
Alright,
It doesn't happen because you're this brilliant strategist who sits there and thinks all night, you know,
Uh-huh.
what am I gonna do the next day? It happens just because of things like that. It's an accidental maneuver, really, that happens that you're just dealing with and you just carry it out. That's the reason when I start talking with you guys about negotiations, I say it's very organic, it's very fluid, so whenever we start dealing with negotiations, what we're hearing here is just the tip of the iceberg, and then you really start to learn when you're in the field and you get what did you learn from her? You learn that she is playing a good guy, bad guy, but it may not even be her doing it, it's just the byproduct of what she's having to deal with. So how did that affect your negotiations?
I felt like to some extent, I like off the bat, she said, you know, when you make your offer, don't even worry about writing a nice letter. They don't care about that. They're just so removed.
Mhm.
So it kind of already made it a little bit less emotional.
Right.
So it almost made us feel like, okay, we're just gonna have to meet the numbers and make it make sense. And it's not like you can tweak any like emotional levers.
It's true, and when you're dealing, that's a completely different,
Yeah.
scenario and client. If you're dealing with people that are selling their home versus an investor selling a home, it's not the same ballgame. I mean, when it's an investor, they're looking only for numbers. And if it's, someone who really does care about who's moving into their house, they want those letters. They want to know that kids are gonna be growing up in the backyard and that their daughter's gonna walk down the spiral staircase to get married. Those are the emotional impacting things that you can't forget during negotiations in those situations. On the other side with an investor, which is what we're dealing with today, it's numbers, period. Bottom line, that's really what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Anything else we need to talk about before we walk out of here today?
No. Sorry.
Any questions? Do you feel like you're in a better position possibly to think through the negotiation process and to strategize as you go into it? I think it's really important to think about it because everybody negotiates differently, and sometimes it's okay to ask the other agent, you know, what are your client, what's your client looking for? Are they the ones that wanna go back and forth, or do they just want to cut to the chase?
Right.
Because you can play it out, or sometimes you can just ask.
Also, one more important thing in this one is to know the script, what to tell to the buyer and to the seller, if you represent, like, you're negotiating over the price. What you have to tell, you convince the seller that this is not the right price for the property. I mean, that's a very important, the script, what to tell them. So
Yeah.
You have to be knowledgeable, you have to know
Yeah, I
the
think
the area, and you have to know the motivation of each party.
it's very true, John, thank you.
You know, sometimes, you know, when they say, we cannot afford it, this means I don't trust you.
I can afford what?
When they say we cannot afford it, this means we don't trust you.
You're saying they don't trust you? That's what they're saying to
No,
you?
no, yeah. You see, when they come with you and they say, okay, for example, $1 million, I'm ready to pay for the house, okay? In the middle of the deal, they come to say, we cannot afford $1 million. They might mean they do not trust the agent.
Yeah, well, I mean, it could possibly.
How come the
be-
first time they could afford it, now they cannot afford it?
Right,
Besides if they lost their job or something major happened.
yeah, things do happen. So today we did number 10, we have 11 and 12 coming up, and then we're gonna be done.
Boom.
And I'm gonna turn this off, and I wanna ask you guys a couple of quick questions before you take off. Turn this off. The way Ignite is actually supposed to be taught, we have not been doing, and I just want you